Well, g'day, I'm John
Another bit of
O'Brake. I'm here
technology.
with Mark and Linda all the way from France. This is only 2 continents today. This is a record for us. And but we're separated by lots of mountains and lots of land. Domm Holland, welcome, mate, from fast.co. And welcome to today's Fireside chat. Mark, do you want to take it away, mate?
Sure, absolutely. Dom has been known to Linda and I for a number of years. He's a fellow Aussie. He's the co-founder and CEO of Fast.co. Absolutely the fastest moving startup in the United States today. Had an unbelievable journey over what appears to be a really short period of time. As I mentioned, fellow Aussie, now in the US, building an amazing team and product. So I'm going to kick this off with some questions, Dom. How did this, this young Aussie, now we can say that because we're a little bit older than you guys, how did this young Aussie turn up in San Francisco, creating an amazing business, finding co-founders, funding, all of this in, what has it been, about 18 months yourself? Tell us your story.
Yeah, sure. Look, I founded the company in March 2019, so March of last year. Raised an angel round in Sydney before I left Australia in May, and then caught the next flight to San Francisco in June, the first week of June, and have been here since. I left my wife and 2 kids at home while I set up, and I sort of just got to SF without a big network, but knowing that I wanted to base a business here. There's the most amount of densest amount of talent for growing high growth companies and for scaling high growth companies and for building high growth technology platforms here in SF or the Bay Area, and as well as venture capital for sort of consumer scale businesses. So it was the place I wanted to build the company from day dot. Got here in June, just started networking and meeting people, anyone who'd be remotely relevant, and sort of just pounding the pavement really. And in September, I met in Labor Day, in America's Labor Day last year, I met Jan Hammer, a venture capitalist at Index Ventures, and he was introduced to me through someone I met on Twitter. And we had breakfast, and on the spot he offered to lead a round, a pre-seed round of ours. We raised a $2.5 million pre-seed round. And closed in October last year. And then I got a visa to move over here. I went back to Australia and picked up the wife and kids and moved them over here in November. And they've been building the sort of team, and really headquartered the business essentially from November. We were really well anchored here from then. And we've been building since then. And, building the one-click checkout for the entire internet with no passwords. And that's a sort of core product that we offer. But to this point, we've been building the team and building the business and all of the skeletons that and the framework that goes with that. And so it's been an amazing journey. Just getting started. You're muted, Mark.
You're muted, Mark. Something's happened to their sound. Anyway, Dom, thanks for that.
That's all right. Very fast moving. It's always a blur in this, as we used to say at Microsoft. It's like drinking from a fire hose when you're really on point and everything's just happening.
Mm-hmm.
How do you get any sleep? What's a life like in the fastest moving startup in the world?
Yeah, look, I probably don't get as much sleep as everyone else, but to be honest, I get plenty of sleep. There's just I think that there's something just about always having forward moving momentum, right? And it's things don't actually have to be frantic to be moving quite quickly. And to be honest, internally, we think we're moving slowly. Like there's, we really would love to be 10x where we are now. But obviously we're doing pretty well. I think it's just having a team of people who have a predisposition for momentum really helps, and avoiding wastage wherever possible, wasted time, wasted energy, wasted resource, and just really kind of being ruthless in that optimization. I think we always we got saying speed through efficiency, not haste. And I think that's a big part of it. But what we're working on is a huge opportunity And one, we make it easier for people to buy things online, right? And there's never been a time in the world where more people are buying things online.
That's
And
right.
so it's a really sort of pressing time for us. But yeah, there's just so much for us to do. So yeah.
So you've used Twitter. You mentioned it before. You've used Twitter amazingly to generate growth. Obviously, connections with VCs using social media.
Yeah.
Was that by design or was that by accident? How did you pick up your 22,000 followers that you're running with today?
I wouldn't say the use of the use of Twitter was very intentional in terms of I've been on Twitter for longer than the last 18 months, but the probably the highest density group of users are in Silicon Valley, right? In San Francisco is tech and venture capital, probably the two highest demographics of users on Twitter. So it's got far less of a user base in Australia compared with the US, and then far less other sectors compared with tech. And so naturally, I'm kind of in the right geographical area, and then segment of the world to be using Twitter. So I think it's a natural social network to be leveraging, as you're growing a tech business, really. But then the effectiveness of Twitter for us was probably the less. I can't really claim all of the accolades for how successful our use of Twitter has been. That has been more surprising. But we all use social media, in our lives. And so, that was intentional. But we just had a really great reception, from all channels, company channels, a lot of our team, quite sort of prolific tweeters or, social media personalities. And I think the reality is that a lot of, one, obviously a fast moving company, a lot of people strive to be, founders or part of fast moving companies. So it's an interesting thing in general. And then two, we're just really open about what we're doing. So people actually get to share and play along at home. And
you are surprisingly open. You are putting so much of your business results, your challenges, your issues, all of that is out there for the world to see.
Yeah, and a lot of people, I've had the board, not recently, but originally I've had the board sort of go, I'm not saying stop, but what do we think about everyone knowing everything about the business? And I'm like, I don't know, if anyone else can manage to operate as quickly as we can, then have at it. And we tell everyone what our plan is. We tell everyone what we're doing. We tell everyone how we're doing it. And we don't have anyone else who's managed to copy. And, so plenty of people watching. So, look, I think it's it's been a great, originally when we first launched, we really were very intentional with using social media purely to hire. We're in one of the most competitive job markets in the world. Whilst there's an incredible, density of high, high value tech talent, they've got the choice of the world. They can work for any major tech company in the world they want. They can work for any startup in the world they want. There's more choice here than anywhere else. And you've got people like Google, Facebook, and everyone else offering absolute top tier salaries, packages, and whatever. So it's really hard to compete for talent. And so we were very intentional about, building awareness and really selling into candidates why they should come work at Fast. And that was really the first and sole driver for our major activity on social media. And it definitely helped. We grew a team from 2 in November to 65 today. In 10 or 11 months. But the reality is that, I think that it just also garnered the attention of a lot of other people on top of candidates, is other people found that interesting. And so, that's really where a lot of, initial traction came from.
So I'm guessing with 65 team members, you probably don't get to do any development anymore. Do you ever code? Because you built that code base initially, didn't you? You built your MVPs yourself.
I think our engineering team probably just doesn't want me in the code too often, to be honest. Even if I had the time. But look, No, I don't spend much time coding at all. I think the very odd piece here and there. I normally take little prototype things that I'll go and run with, and then we'll end up sort of deploying in. But I'm very active technically. You know, from in the technical side of our business, the product engineering and design. You know, areas. I mean, I'm active in all of the business, but you know, I've obviously got a unique interest in the technical side of what we're doing. And you know, a lot of what we're doing really is about like finding product opportunities from technical innovation, as opposed to finding product, you know, the opposite way, which it normally runs from. So, you know, I'm active, but also just encourage the team to be like, you know, all of our engineering team to be quite entrepreneurial and think of, you know, business opportunity that can come from.
When did you start developing? When did you start coding away?
Yeah. So I originally I spent 48 hours and built a prototype of what became Fast Login in October 2018. But I wasn't sort of working on it full time at all. It was called Bypass at the time. Like, it was just a sort of concept. But you know, that initial sort of prototype grew into an MVP, which became Fast Login, which I launched in March 2019. So you know, I guess. And really, you know, March 2019 is really when I sort of went, all right, I'm going to throw myself into this. I'm going to take the prototype that I built, turn it into a proper MVP and launch it to the world. And yeah.
So did you have a background then in coding and that sort of thing, or was that just something you just picked up on a few years ago?
No, I've been coding for a long time. I started coding when I was, so Mark was being very generous calling me young before, because I'm like the old man of Silicon Valley, I feel like, in terms of founders.
Fair enough.
I was interviewed on a podcast yesterday by a 17-year-old. I'm like, I'm literally almost double your age. I'm 33. And but I still feel young. But yeah, so when I was 14, I started coding, you know, a long time ago now. And yeah, I've been building stuff forever, but I haven't like worked as, you know, an engineer that goes, you know, sat and worked in a company for years ever. I like to build stuff and sell stuff. And I've
that was kind of going to lead me to the next question, is what's your progression to get to where you are today? Because it's kind of like, you know, who was the Domm that came out of Australia? And how did you have the energy and drive to do what you're doing now?
Yeah, it's a good question. People ask me all the time. I don't know. I'm a pretty high energy sort of person. But someone asked me once, I'm like, I don't know, there's fire burning inside. It just burns brighter every day. I'm like, I get more energy. But also I like being busy. I like, you know, the more stress and problems and stuff going on, the higher energy I get. So, you know, if things are quiet and stagnant, then I get really low energy and it's not great. So yeah, I don't know. I've always liked it, but you know, it really is a very fun and interesting thing what we're doing. You know, the process of scaling a business and product, and seeing like, you know, tens of thousands and millions of users, you know, using something that you're building, and seeing, you know, like seeing all the planning and progression actually come to fruition is an amazing process. You know, seeing all the internal operations growing, and but you know, like on social media, but it's like seeing we have literally thousands of people all around the world wearing fast hoodies, you know, and it's not the sort of what that means is there's thousands of people all around the world who went and purchased a hoodie with fast checkout, right? You know, who took a product that we built, and, you know, everyone thinks it's about the hoodie. It's not. It's like, these are actually like fast users. These are people who've gone and used this product, and, you know, and are walking the streets of Europe or of Asia or whatever, you know, wearing this name, and it's like represents, you know, the progress that we made in a short amount of time, and everything that we're doing. So yeah, I think that's like an infectious thing. And, you know, I can tell you, we have candidates who've come from every major tech company, and you know, knock back jobs at major tech companies to come here, and it's because it is infectious. You know, it's like, you know, Mark's point, we're probably the fastest growing company in the US, maybe, you know, one of the fastest growing in the world, and it's something that people want to be part of, and it's you know, it's a really great place to.
That's beautiful, mate. Yeah, I love
Domm, where are your team members? Because, you know, lockdowns, offices are sort of remote these days. Where is the team all spread out?
Yeah, so about half the team is like typically based in the Bay Area. Some of them, like our head of engineer, our VP of engineering, Jem, who is ex Apple and Uber and Amazon. He normally lives in Mountain View, which is like basically near like Google's headquarters. But we're in lockdown. We put in a program called Fast Flex, which is basically a flexible working program for forever. And so basically means you can work from home, you can work from our office or any of our offices. We'll open more around the world, and or you can just work from anywhere in the world. We don't care. Like, so long as you can get your work done, we really don't care where you live. And so our VP of Eng went. He's Turkish. He's married with a young child, and they went to Turkey. And they were like, well, we can have grandparents in Turkey. So I mean, he's got the hardest job in the world because he's working Californian hours from Turkey, and it's horrific. But he seems to not mind. Anyway, so that is a big one where not everyone from the Bay Area is still in the Bay Area now. Like, some people have left or they're temporarily away. We've got people on road trips. Half our team have just been like in random places the whole time. But yeah, so about half are typically based in the Bay Area, and the other half are just everywhere. We, still a bunch in North America, so other parts of the US or in Canada. But we have people, I think 5 or 6 countries now that we have team members in, but no real restriction, and so we're bringing people on in other parts of the world. Our head of customer success is based in Amsterdam. We got engineers in Switzerland, and a couple more in Turkey and a few other places. So yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, no, that European time zone is a little bit difficult for some of those guys. So here we're in Central European time, 6 p.m. in the evening.
Particularly coming from the west coast of the US.
Yeah,
it's another 3 hours on me. So, so Dom, what I'm fascinated in, I think this is probably the first one we've had where we've had like a rapid scale up like this, and so I'd love to just sort of hear a bit more of your story around the last 12 months and scaling up.
Sure. So can't remember any of it, but go
yeah, fair enough. So you've gone from 2 to 65 people, is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
So I mean, one of the things, I work professionally in building teams and that sort of thing. So I find this stuff fascinating. How have you gone about doing that? How have you done that, successfully?
So one of the things that we did, that we've always focused on is, building a really strong foundation. So we knew, maybe naively, but we predicted that the business would grow really fast, and that we would be growing really quickly. And so we built a strong foundation from both, human resources standpoint, or from a team standpoint, and from a business operations standpoint, and from an engineering standpoint. Right, is the whole reason of coming to SF was so we can find people who can architect a platform that can support billions of people, right? So we've been building, Jem, the VP of Eng, he built the identity solutions right across Apple, and then he was at Uber building out Uber's whole commerce stack, right? And so he's been in a place, had thousands of engineers building the same type of commerce systems that we're building here at Fast, and they're designed to support large scales of people. And but the people standpoint is the same thing. Is we put it on an HR manager. When we were probably, I can't remember exactly. I think she was like double digits, so maybe 10, 11 or something like that. Because we knew we were going to have HR, HR stuff to deal with. We took on a director of talent about the same time. To manage, recruitment. The second that I closed my pre-seed round, I took on 20 recruitment agencies. I joined every recruitment platform that I could, and we hired a videographer to create videos for hiring, and just went nuts and did everything all at once. And obviously that worked. We then hired we then got rid of all the recruitment agencies because we got much better at recruiting in-house than they were. But so setting up those platforms is really important. Like, the reality is, I've said many times, I think startups are just a series of problems, right? And like, that's really what they are. And but if you like solving problems, then it's a great place to be. And you should just expect that there are problems, right? And what you want to do is try and anticipate what the problems are going to be before you get to them. And that, like, that's how you can actually grow faster, is you're always going to have problems, but you ideally want to sort of know the problems that are going to come. And this is why hiring people who've got experience at like large scale tech companies, or, you know, the next phase beyond, are really important, because they can see around corners, right? They can see the operational challenges you're about to have.
They've seen that sort of stuff before.
Yeah. And they see it, you know, it's just like textbook, right? What's going to happen when you get to 100 employees or 50 employees or 20 employees or whatever, is just like you have different stages. Same thing from an engineering standpoint. The bottlenecks that you're going to have with certain technology at different, like, you know, points of people. And so you can make decisions, you know, if you do that effectively, it means you can make decisions to not hit certain bottlenecks, right? To go, right, maybe we invest a little bit more time, a little bit more money now, but it's going to see us through for longer. And so, you know, we were just kind of very methodical about doing that early at all parts of the business. And I think it's been really helpful. You know,
Domm, you've got a co-founder, Allison, you know, who's also the COO, obviously keeping a very good eye on operational matters. How did you meet Allison? How did you negotiate joining the company and things like that? Can you share a little bit of that story?
Yeah. So, you know, Allison was one of the people I met. I think I reached out to her first in July last year. So I got to the US in June. Allison was the head of global product operations at Uber in their money team. So we're looking after financial services. Uber's got an incredibly large financial services division. Obviously, you know, there's a lot of money going into Uber and a lot of money coming out of Uber every day, right? All the drivers and riders and so forth. You know, and so she, you know, had a great remit, a lot of, you know, very relevant experience. And she was an angel investor. So she obviously has a unique interest in startups. And so I just reached out to her cold on Twitter and sent her a message and said, you know, I'd love to kind of, you know, I'm an Aussie founder here in SF, love to tell you more about what we're doing. And normally that's enough to get people kind of interested in what you're doing. It's weird enough, you know, a bit different enough that it's that they'll take a look. And so we caught up for coffee, and I just thought about what we're doing. And she, you know, she said she had written a thesis years earlier about frictionless finance, and thought what we were building was, like, you know, exactly her vision for the world, basically. And so it was really aligned. She wanted to invest in the company as an angel. She offered and asked if she could introduce me to a couple of venture capitalists. One of them was Jan Hammer at Index Ventures, and who ended up leading our pre-seed. But she, you know, she rates Jan as the #1 fintech investor in the world, as do many. He's actually rated the #1 fintech investor in the world, I think. But, you know, he led rounds in TransferWise and Adyen and Robinhood, and like really incredible businesses. And anyway, so I went and met with Jan. We had breakfast, and on the spot, you know, Jan offered to lead a pre-seed round. And so afterwards, I sent Allison a message, and so I wasn't looking for a co-founder. I sent Allison a message saying, Jan's in, are you in? And she wrote back, and she's like, one, she couldn't believe it anyway, because that's a pretty fast venture capital deal. You know, he hadn't seen a deck, hadn't seen anything before the meeting. And then, and so she was pretty blown away. And then two, she's like, I already said I would invest. I said, no, I don't want you to invest. Come help build the company. And anyway, so she did. And so, you know, the rest is kind of history. She took a month to take a belated honeymoon, and then she officially, you know, came on board in November, and we got going. Yeah.
Wow,
that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So you're saying that there was someone there that you said that the first person, they didn't even see the deck, and they were just like, they were in.
Yeah, Jan. Yeah.
So how did you pull that one off, man? That's kind of breaking all the rules, right? Which is a good thing. But
yeah, maybe. I mean, so the deck is kind of like, you know, and I say to people, don't get too hung up on the deck, right? I've never met anyone who's like, I sent a deck to an investor and they wired me some cash, right? That's just not how decks work. But like, they're a good summary. I mean, typically what happens in most of our investment rounds is most of the time an investor will say yes, and then say, have you got a deck or something so I can show it to the partners, right? And normally that's kind of what happens. But that's not to say that a deck is like not helpful at all in fundraising, but it's just, I think we think that they're like more critical than they are. Yeah, I you know, completely, he's in the fintech space. He understands, you know, he's looked at lots of payment businesses, lots of, you know, consumer businesses, understood the pain point. I mean, every consumer in the world understands the pain point of like passwords and forms, right? And having to fill in the same crap over and over. So it's an easy thing to understand. And one of the reasons why I think so many people sort of resonate with what we're doing. But he understood that. understood our strategy, the business makes all the sense in the world. And, the thing that he got conviction on was that we were going to be able to go and execute against that, right? That's what really I think an investor, feels. And, still now, I mean, we've had investors who say no to us, or not necessarily say no to us, but just unaligned, or, even before we're sort of really talking about a fundraise, just like, it's not the right opportunity for us. The reality is, your job as a founder is to show, in fundraising, in fundraising context, is to, really accurately show that there's a clear problem, demonstrate what your solution is, make them believe that solution would work, or could at least possibly work, right? That it would make sense that if this is going to work, that is going to solve the problem, like that could potentially solve the problem. And that if it solves the problem, if the solution does work, then it will be a very big business, right? The market opportunity is so large that if that solution, which makes sense that it would work, if it works, then it's going to be a great business. And then that you're going to be able to that you are going to actually be able to execute that solution, right? And so if you do those things, that's the formula for getting an investment, right? And so the reality is, when
I think that's the world's greatest summary of a pitch ever.
Yeah, and so it's pretty simple, and so I'm like, either an investor doesn't believe that the problem, I mean, I've had investors not believe in the problem. They're like, oh, I got, one password and autofill, and it's not an issue anymore. And it's like, well, 70-year-old ladies and, grannies at home don't feel the same, but okay, you're a rich white investor in Sydney or something. You've got a different view of the world to most, right? And so I think that's one thing. The part about the solution, that this is like the most, probably the most like up in the air thing, where it's like, it's hard to sometimes understand if a solution is going to work when it's like something that is unknown, right? And a lot of the time in a lot of startups, you don't know whether the founder doesn't know if the solution is going to work. It makes, like, again, needs to make sense that it could possibly work, but what you're trying to do is like, it should kind of be novel, right? And so who knows whether it will work? Market conditions can, the buyers, end users, like there's a lot of factors that are going to go into deciding whether or not a solution would work, and competitors, whatever else. So that is like one big unknown, and for a lot of reasons, investors may just pull out on that, just going, it's maybe a 50-50, but there's too many competitors that weigh it against your odds, or for whatever other reason. Now, but if you can kind of get past them, and the market opportunities are given, if the market looks small, then you're never going to sort of raise venture capital. But because even if the solution works, and I think this is where Australia gets a little bit backwards sometimes, is that Australian VCs will back solutions that have a higher likelihood of succeeding, but a smaller market opportunity. And so where maybe we need to back more things which may be less likely to succeed, but have a much bigger market opportunity. Yeah. And American investors do that well. And then the last piece about, if they say no because if they sort of agree with the first three and then they say no, then it's just that you haven't sold well enough that you're the people who are going to execute well on that. Part of it could be track record and whatever, but at the end of the day, it comes down to like relationship. Like that's the whole relationship piece. Does the person think really believe that you are going to be capable of doing that? And and so in that first meeting with Jan, obviously that's the thing that he was able to get conviction with, was that this guy is going to go do this. And the reality is, I think everyone wants to convince investors that, with their money, this is what I can go do. What you want to convince investors is that, hey, this is what I'm going to go do. If you want, it can be your money that's helping to do it, as opposed to someone else's money. So they need to feel like you're going to go do this regardless of whether or not they're in or out, not like they're your lifeline. Anyway, so yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. And so there's kind of this combination here, right? There's a lot of you in that. There's a lot of, the idea, but it's also, you sort of targeted people that understood the industry, or at least understood bits of the industry, and were looking for, and it really speaks more of a partnership than it does of just someone who's just going to come and back this thing. And then the next is, it seems like the third thing in line is, oh, here's the business model.
Yeah, I mean, so we actually have been pretty fortunate that, we haven't changed our product strategy, our go-to-market strategy, like since before our pre-seed, we actually have had like a pretty good plan, and followed it, fairly well. And so, so we've been pretty fortunate there. But to be honest, it's not many businesses that like kind of have the same type of linear approach. We have quite a simplified kind of overarching product strategy, right? And there's a lot of nuance within that. But the reality is, one-click checkout, like there's not many variances of one-click checkout, right? It's you add another click and that's a completely different product. So, like it's a pretty, as an overarching vision, it's pretty clear. But a lot of businesses change. They change business models. They change market segments they're going to, target. They might change the actual product itself to kind of better serve, different markets. So it's pretty rare that like those things stay fixed, in stone. And that's why if you like kind of, for most founders, if they're overselling those components, then the risk, most investors know that stuff's going to change. And so if most of the reason why you're pitching, why you're going to be successful is the product, then you're kind of like actually devaluing yourself.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing.
So they say timing is of the essence for everything, don't they? And I think, for you, perhaps you've just been in the best timing of ever with COVID and all that sort of stuff. So can you tell us if there's been any pivots or any changes in your in what you've been doing from the beginning to throughout COVID? Like what's...
Yeah, and so like originally I started the company, I built the first prototype in October 2018 because I was watching my wife's grandmother who forgot a password and couldn't order groceries, right? And legitimately sitting at a kitchen table just couldn't check out. And that's where, there's a whole sort of, inception came from. And the reality is that what COVID has done is, apart from like increase our market size, is force more people than ever to be, billions of people around the world to be sheltered in their house, right? And the most at-risk people because of COVID are the elderly, right? And so there's more grannies than ever before in their house having to order groceries online. It has just taken the exact problem that we set out to solve and blown it up, right? And so, that itself has sort of been more of a validator, I guess. But to be honest, we haven't changed almost anything. Even the speed of our growth, nothing, product strategy, everything remains stagnant. The only thing that I would say is that enterprise adoption has and will be much faster than pre-COVID. Purely because, large supermarket chains or large, retailers here in the US or anywhere around the world, which e-commerce may have been 5 or 10% of their business, it's now like 35, 40% of their business. And so it's just a critical part of their business now, as opposed to like one selling arm. And so because of that, they need to really embrace digital technologies to reinforce their e-commerce side.
Certainly see that here in Europe and in France particularly, which hasn't been a great adopter of technology. We're seeing shops...
Oh, come on, you got a cheese vending machine, mate.
We've got a cheese vending machine.
No one's seen one of those before.
Yeah.
Oh, no, don't get me wrong. There's some absolutely amazing things, and we're completely surprised at the French ecosystem and economy at times. But online shopping isn't that great here. Then all of a sudden, we started seeing shops opening up their first websites with their first shopping carts, and wow, and people are now talking about it around the barbecues and things.
So that's right. Like, e-commerce has been growing 30% quarter on quarter. Like it's amazing for a category that's already in like well into the trillions of dollars. Is really tremendous. But the reality, everyone thinks that the growth, there's been a lot of growth on the buyer side, right? Grannies in their house buying groceries, just everyone in their house buying everything online, right? So it makes sense. But that's right. A lot of the movement is happening on the seller side. Small businesses now moving online, right? Same thing is happening here. I know all around the world, everyone's got like QR codes and wants to order online or see menus online, but no one wants to hand out menus. And so a lot of interesting, activations there. But then, but everywhere right up to enterprise, right? It's like even people who already have e-commerce offerings, it's like, are they good enough, or are people going to go elsewhere because it's just too hard, it's too slow? What we're seeing is that enterprise are going from being slow moving, maybe to adopt new technologies, to saying anything that could possibly move the needle for us to put in place, and anything that won't move the needle is just like permanently off. And so, checkout itself is obviously like the number one area for e-commerce. So we're definitely in a good spot.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah.
Mm.
So I actually want to ask some. Oh, sorry, Linda. Go.
Sorry, mate. How's the family coping with
Oh, that was going to be my question.
Yep. Sorry, mate.
That's all right.
So, you've moved over. We've found a big culture change being here. How is your family dealing with that?
Yeah, it's been really hard. They moved over. I was kind of here from June, but they really moved from November. Not too long, sort of 4 or 5 months before COVID hit. And so hadn't really developed any friend groups. We were living in a 2-bedroom apartment in San Francisco with 2 kids, the 2 of us and 2 kids, and really active kids. They closed every park. You weren't allowed to drive anywhere. Weren't allowed to go to other national parks. Weren't allowed to go to beaches. So it was basically stay in your apartment. And which is, for kids, especially as energetic as ours, is like hell. No support groups. We don't have family here. It was really, really difficult. And in the end, my wife and kids ended up going back to Australia for 3 months and spending time there. And they're back here now. But that's been hard. We actually moved into a house now out of the city, because everything's still like pretty much in lockdown, and kind of give the kids a place that they can run around. And so that's made it a little bit easier, but I've got very social, wife and kids, and it's still like the lack of school, or the lack of things to be able to go to and meet people is really challenging. For me, I meet 100 people a day. I couldn't talk to less people. I couldn't talk to more people rather. And so it's just very different, like my sort of day to day is very different to their experience. So it is a really challenging time for them, but
the Bay Area is really quite spread out for people that haven't been there. It stretches
massive.
for a long, long way.
Yeah.
Everyone drives between places, and these roads can get busy at times.
Yeah, definitely.
At times.
Yeah. Well, actually, it's pretty good at the moment, to be honest.
I'll bet.
It's been great.
Yeah. It's one of those places that ups and downs very rapidly, and this is the beauty of the United States. It moves quickly. I've visited the Bay since the 80s. In fact, my first office down at Mountain View in 1995, before the Googles of this world were around the place. And
you would have been living on an orange grove by then.
Almost.
Something like that.
Almost. And these days, it's all about being able to book and getting into the right cafe to be able to get all the business done so quickly. But it's hard. You're right. It's less of a social place until the weekends. The weekday is pretty busy. It's shuffling around the place, got all the sort of usual things when there is schools. And when there's not schools, the neighborhood can become a little bit quiet.
That's a big challenge. But I want to kind of segue. What has surprised you the most? So you're based in what we all know as Silicon Valley, obviously. The Bay Area. What surprised you the most about Silicon Valley? What's some stuff you didn't expect that you found there?
Coriander's really cheap. It's really cheap. You can get a lot of it, and it's
because Americans don't like it.
You eat mangoes green here.
Yes.
It's bizarre. They never get to yellow. Which is just weird. And what else? I think they're kind of the biggest things. To be honest, it's a lot of people ask, the prices of moving and whatnot. Economies are quite similar. Language is quite similar. If I didn't sound so strange with an Aussie accent, people would have no idea I'm not from here. I look the same. So it's been really easy. You want to rent a place, you find a real estate agent. You want to everything's pretty similar. So there hasn't been any major things like that. There's a lot of I actually think the one thing that I found most interesting was, despite being in Silicon Valley and San Francisco, I mean, the homelessness is out of control here, and the sort of the stark contrast to poverty is absolutely the most awakening thing in this city. But beyond that, it's a really low tech place. For a place that produces the world's technology, most stuff is really low tech. car parks are like, technology from from 20, 30 years ago, whereas, Australia, everything's new. The houses are old here, buildings are old here. Like it doesn't, if you didn't know you were in Silicon Valley, you would have it doesn't smack you in the face.
Yeah, that is one of the most surprising things. You just feel like you're just driving through a suburb, and then you suddenly see the Google sign or the LinkedIn sign or the whatever. It's
Yeah, I know. I think you expect, that everyone's got like all the doors are different and the windows are different and the cars are different, but it's like, it's not. It's
just a very expensive suburb.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, so just generally coming to America now, it's funny, like I've been here for 4.5 years now, and I live in the South, right? So come over here, you'll get a bit of culture shock. It's funny, and depending where you are, but my observations of spending a lot of time in California doing business is that California is a lot more like Australia in a sense. Just the cost of living to start with, just the way they live and the mix and the diversity and that sort of thing. You come over here, it's much more plain Jane, and and a slower pace of life. And I picked you up this morning on Twitter on the double negative, and they don't get double negatives here at all.
Well, also humor. It's a very different humor here.
Yeah.
I say all the time, like a lot of the time people don't understand my humor at all. I'm like, I think people probably think I'm like not that funny here. Whereas in Australia, I think people think I'm a lot funnier. And it's kind of like one part of my personality I don't get in the US. So I don't know. Yeah, I'm worried I'm going to turn into a boring person without my humor. But anyway, it is one thing they just don't seem to understand, especially sarcasm. Sarcasm is like just flies over people's heads. And so especially on Twitter, like do not attempt sarcasm on Twitter. you will be crucified. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's funny because even just in the part of the world where I am, I'm in the mountains in North Carolina, and this pocket of the world is actually their humor is self-deprecating, just like Australia. And yet the rest of the culture is completely. If you be sarcastic, it's like they think you're having a go at them. And it is funny where you move around this part of the world because you can't. Again, that mistake. I'm coming to the US. It's just like an American Australia, but the US really is a conglomerate of so many. I would almost say different countries.
Yes.
But,
I've always felt the same. That's right. Like you move around, and the people you see from around the states, they kind of say the same thing. But it's actually not. It's a federation of states. It kind of is like separate countries. Even in the sort of like in Australia, the states have far less sort of individual power than the states here in the US have. So it really is kind of structured that way. I've always found that LA is really close to Sydney. Those two places are like very, very similar. So yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, fantastic.
So Domm, before you moved over, you were out traveling the countryside. A lot of Queenslanders. We ran into each other as we were circulating around the states a lot. Yeah. You were helping, guiding, mentoring startups. You were trying to enthuse them to have a bit of a go.
Yeah.
Different sort of mindset there, particularly in regional Queensland. Now that you've sort of had the Kool-Aid, you've had 18 months worth of a rocket ship launching there in the States.
Yeah.
What would you tell those typical Aussie startups that we spoke to many times throughout Queensland, throughout Australia, throughout the regional areas?
Same thing. I just had to give them another lesson and show them, try and tell them a different way. I was saying to people for a long time, I think Australians need to take more risks and really shoot for the stars more, right? Both entrepreneurs and, venture capital. I think that I was saying this before Fast is that I really do think we, our ecosystem is definitely growing, definitely getting better, and I'm not sort of being negative about it, but I think the one thing we can absolutely improve on is taking bigger risks. And that's not just venture capitalists. Every founder I speak to in Australia, loves to, sort of hang crap on the Australian VC community. But the reality is, I actually think that we have founders that aren't taking big enough risks. Like,
Interesting.
you know, if your business works, not that exciting for a lot of these things. It's not venture scale. So it doesn't make sense that venture capitalists are saying no, because even if it works, it's like, it's not going to hit big numbers. At the same time, I think that if, you know, it is a little bit of, I do think it's two sides, both need to get this, because I've seen a lot of, you know, I've seen a number of founders that do want to, you know, do big things, even fast. I didn't really try and raise venture capital in Australia, but did meet with a few Australian venture capitalists. And honestly, it's like, they just don't want to take the risk. It's like, it's just, it's they're risking capital. And it's, you know, I would have some VC saying, but for you to win, you're going to have to get all of the, you know, retailers on board. I'm like, yes. That's exactly what I'm telling you. That was the pitch. And I'm like, that's not the problem. That's the go to market. And
Right.
And they're like, oh, I just think that's a lot of work. It's like, yes, that's the whole point of like doing this. And that's the point of the venture capital, is to be able to go and do big things, right? And it's almost like our investors don't believe that, and it's like, you know, they believe that you know, I don't know what they believe, and even some of the best you know, VCs, I think, in Australia just haven't quite grasped that. And so you know, if anything, I just want everyone to take more risks, and, you know, founders to take bigger risks and work on bigger things, and absolutely do not serve Australia only from day one. Even if you stay in Australia, it's perfectly fine, but, you know, you can stay in regional Queensland, but just serve a global audience day one. And, you know, for the investors, like, stop backing small ideas and back big ideas. And, you know, here, get more comfortable with losing money, not, you know, and because that's going to get you more comfortable with making a lot of money. And, you know, that's what these investors here, if you make, you know, the returns we make in Australia, investors here would be, you know, they would never back that founder again, you know, for only returning, you know, X 100% on their money. They want much bigger returns than that. And so, you know, that's what we need to really get better at in Australia.
So advice is, get out of the country, get out and talk to the world, talk to customers, talk to investors all around the world. Aim for something a lot bigger. You know, one of the reasons we moved to Europe is there's 400 million to 700 million people within half the size of Australia. It's much bigger market.
Yeah. It's, you know, this is a really big point. Like, market size is so critical, right? And the, you know, sort of just greedily, right? The reality is, I only have so many hours in my day, and I can do everything in my power to try and stretch them, but I only have so many of these hours. And so if you're serving a market, you know, in the US, it's over 13 times bigger than the Australian market, right? So imagine imagine a marketing manager here in the US, doesn't even need to be a founder. A marketing manager here in the US will put the same amount of time into a marketing plan here than they would in Australia, but they're going to serve an audience that's 13 times bigger, right? The result that you're going to get is 13 times bigger. And so, you know, that's true of everything that you do, right? And so the opportunity is just bigger. Now, again, whether you actually move to another market or not, you just need to be serving that market. And if you're setting yourself up just to serve Australia, I don't care what the segment is, then it's not going to be venture scale. There's very few sectors in Australia that could be like US venture scale from serving Australians. You know, like here they need to believe you're going to have revenues of at least $100 million a year for it to be venture scale. There's not many industries in Australia at that sort of scale, and for the entire sector, let alone for one player in that business. Even if you're the giant, you're still not, you know, even if you manage to capture half of the market in one company, not many categories that will give you that type of scale. And so you're just not going to get it. Like, you know, if you're building a business in Australia to serve Australians solely, it's just,
and bigger markets bring faster transactions. You know, there's a lot more conversations, there's shorter conversations. Meetings don't necessarily go for an hour and a half or 2 hours like they might in Australia. It's speed. There's more of it going on.
And just more data to churn.
And particularly coming into the US, and the big thing I found was kind of, you know, the way they handle failure, and they see that as, you know, as long as you can show your growth trajectory out of maybe a poor business decision or other things going on, they just treat it very, very differently to the way they do in Australia.
And don't get me wrong, like you definitely don't want to be like optimizing for failure. The reality is, here,
no.
say 6 or 7 out of 10 businesses fail, right? The idea is as a founder, you don't think, oh, well, that's fine. Odds are already stacked against us. The reality is, as a founder, your job is to de-risk. Your job is like, what do we do to make ourselves the 2 or 3 out of 10, right? And you absolutely want to be on the other side of that. It's not like a luck situation. The founder is driving those odds, not like the category driving the odds. Right. But an investor overall is going to come out and go, all right, well, over my portfolio, this is our sort of odds that we got in the end. But as a founder, as a business, those aren't your odds. Your odds are 100 out of 100, chance of success. But you've got to drive those odds.
Yeah.
And I think that's definitely key component.
Fantastic. Well, any parting thoughts, Mark, Linda? We've got to wrap it up here.
Well, no, there's so much that Domm's just sort of talked about.
Oh my goodness, I feel like we've just drunk from a fire hose. So.
Yeah, as we say, drinking from the fire hose. But the messages for other founders: get out there, have a go, chase your markets, do it fast, all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, just don't waste any time. Yeah.
Yeah, don't worry about making a mistake. Don't worry about failing. Obviously, get better, hire good people, create the environment that they can thrive in.
What's your last words? Your last passing words? Fast words.
You don't need any permission whatsoever. It's probably the number one thing, I think.
I like that. Yeah. Outback Steakhouse over here used to have on their coasters, no rules, just right. And which I always found quite funny because somebody said, "Oh, that's really Australian." I went, "Okay," but So I do have one parting thought. I'm a mountain bike rider, and I reckon that shirt you're wearing, if you can do that up into some kind of mountain bike shirt, I reckon I could promote that amongst the mountain bikers up here. So
nice. We're working on it. Yeah, there's gonna be a few ranges coming.
That'd be cool to have fast on the front.
There's a lot of athletes. We have NASCAR racing car drivers actually like out wearing our stuff. They buy our hoodies. I mean, we are athletes who just like to, what other word would you want to associate yourself with as an athlete? So it's anyway. We'll have to get in and get ourselves some hoodies. We got the Bear t-shirts coming. So from last week, from our Bear coffee guy, but we'll have to get in and get some hoodies, eh? Sounds good. Well, it's great chatting. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you, mate.
Stay warm.
Yeah, thanks very much. We're just what we'll do is we'll kill off the Facebook stream first. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Linda. I'm John Break. Domm Holland's been a real pleasure, mate. Real pleasure having you on. So thanks very much.
Thank you. Cheers.
Everyone.
Thanks all.
All right.